Welcome to the Aviation Pros Podcast, the go-to platform for professionals in the aviation industry. Powered by AviationPros.com, the leading source for comprehensive news, insights, and data on airport operations. Whether you're focused on airport management, improvement programs, ground handling, equipment, MRO, or FBO operations, we've got you covered with the expertise and resources you need to stay ahead. Welcome back to the Aviation Pros Podcast, where we explore the evolving landscape of the airport industry through conversations with leading voices shaping the future of air travel. I'm Joe Petrie, Editor-in-Chief for Airport Business. In this episode, we sit down with Chris Gwilliam, Senior Vice President of Global Business Development at Airport Dimensions, to unpack insights from the Airport Experience 2025 study, a global survey of over 10,000 frequent flyers that reveals a growing concern among passengers: overcrowded terminals. Two-thirds of travelers say airports are more crowded than ever, and many are willing to pay for a better experience, for premium lounges and wellness offerings to fast-track security and personalized digital tools. But what does this shift in expectations mean for airport leaders, planners, and concessionaires? Chris walks us through the emerging trends shaping travel behavior, how airports can rethink underutilized space, and why digital transformation and flexible design will be critical in delivering seamless, high-value experience for tomorrow's passenger demand. Let's dive into the conversation. Chris, thank you very much for speaking with me today. Really appreciate you taking the time. I read the AX25 report, and I thought it was a pretty interesting read for a lot of what the airports are facing, especially in North America, a lot of their different challenges. So I want to start with the big picture of the overall report. When you look at that, what do you think is the single most important takeaway from the AX25 report that airport executives looking to improve their passenger experience?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, no, agree. We thought it was a really insightful piece of research this year. We did go out and we surveyed 10,000 travelers across global markets. And, I think some of the key messages coming out were there's a growing concern around crowding and overcrowding in airports. And, 66% of our respondents basically stated their perception is that the airport is getting more and more busy. More and more crowded. So that's a huge insight around how do we solve for that, and how do airports try and solve for that, especially when you consider, the context that air travel is only projected to get busier and busier. We already know that 2025 has surpassed 2024. 2024 was a record year. And if, ACI is predicting data that says, volumes are going to double again by 2042. So this isn't a problem that's going away. In fact, it's going to get worse. So that's number one. I think the other thing is around there's a really willingness and openness for customers and travelers to have a digital relationship with their airport. Whether that be in the form of a loyalty program, getting targeted offers, discounts. And so, we think that when you combine those things together, how do you use space more efficiently and how do you use digital services more efficiently will help, alleviate some of that crowding problem.
Let's go back to that 66% number. That's a pretty sizable amount of people that are going through an airport that are feeling it is more crowded. What kind of scalable solutions should airports be considering if a physical expansion isn't an option for them to try and address some of these concerns?
Yeah, no, great question. Obviously, number one is, can you expand? But we know expansion, to your point, Joe, can take a while, right? And I think our message to a lot of airports is to really look at the space that they do have and ask the question, are you really utilizing that space as effectively as you can? There has been a change in how customers want to use, the airport, and, some of the more traditional, concessions concepts may not be getting the same use as they once were. And so, if that's not generating the revenue and if that's not solving bringing guests in and attracting guests, then, is there an opportunity to change that concept? Can you look in mezzanines and basements to see whether there's, opportunities to put in things like lounges, for instance? So, we know that lounges are growing in popularity and in demand, and they can occupy space that, traditional retail or restaurants who want to be on Main Street, right, and want to have that visibility, lounges can occupy real estate that maybe is on mezzanines or is in basements, and it's visible and it's hidden. So how do you get creative with space? I mean, we've seen airports who have relocated offices that maybe were actually, airside previously, and they've relocated them to make more room for, passenger dwelling spaces. So it's really getting creative around how do you, most efficiently use your space.
Now, the report also highlights the importance of the affluent leisure traveler and how that's such a key segment for airports to target this. What makes them so commercially important, and how can airports
Yeah.
better identify and serve them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think first of all, it's probably important to recognize what the affluent, leisure traveler, is. And, this isn't based on any particular, demographic that is, certain income level or certain age. This is actually people who are traveling through the airport frequently and are spending money, in the airport. So, that's how we define that. And, it really is your loyal, regular customers who, if you were an airline, it would be your top tier, customers that, ultimately you give more benefits. If you're a hotel, it's your, diamond, platinum, level, passengers that are coming through the airport. And, you want to give more benefits and give more, look after those customers because they're the ones that are really, coming through your airport. So it's, and they're spending more. I mean, that was the research that came in is they're spending significantly more than other travelers who maybe just come through and just, pass through. So, to your point, Joe, really looking at that audience and catering to that audience is really important.
And that audience, when you mentioned that, how they're spending more, and and looking at the report, it says they're spreading it across the retail and experiences in the airport. So how should an airport be rethinking their concession strategy to better align with this segment of traveler?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think going back to what I was saying before, I mean, what we're finding now is that traveler is looking at more experiences, right? And they want a more premium, because they're coming through the airport and because they're using it frequently, right? And they probably do have, status on that, they want a more premium experience. So, for example, there's many things that you can think about. How do you premiumize that airport journey? Providing a fast track security is just one example, right? Like giving that customer benefit, maybe give them priority parking so that, as they park in the airport, they can park closer to the terminal. It makes them, more efficient, makes them feel more important. They would spend money on that. They would spend money on that fast track, getting through security, you know, providing things like lounges or, premium facilities where they can, where they can dwell. Those are the sorts of things that traveler would appreciate, enjoy, but importantly for airports, actually spend money, to do that.
And let's talk more about lounges in the report. One of the things I noticed is 90%, 97% of lounge program members would not give up access to the program, which honestly I think is a little low of a number, but somebody who enjoys their lounge. Now, that being said, because we've seen the rise of the independent lounge over the last decade in North America, are these now becoming the baseline expectation, and how does this really reshape airport planning?
Yeah, no, thank you, Joe. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there was an overwhelming, theme in the data around how important having lounge access, is. And again, particularly for that, affluent leisure traveler and people who are coming through that airport frequently and they want to escape that the crowds, right? As we were talking about, they want a place where they can have an oasis and an escape and dwell and enjoy before their flight comes. And so, I think traditionally maybe airports that were thinking, oh, we're not big enough to have a lounge. Well, actually, maybe you are now, right? So, the medium hub airports, I think there's an opportunity for, lounges to go into airports that maybe hadn't considered them previously. And I also think as well there's different segments of lounges now. I mean, you have your airline lounge, you have your, your sponsored lounges, which have become, more popular, but your shared use lounges. And so, maybe where airports previously thought, oh, well, I'm good. I've got an airline lounge. I'm fine. Well, actually, no, because there's different customers, audiences that, maybe would need a shared use lounge or a financial institution sponsored lounge. So, I think it's thinking about your portfolio and asking yourself, do you have enough lounge space designated, and are you serving the different lounge user segment types that are available? And there's a lot more space that needs to be allocated to really cater to that demand. And I think the other thing that we've been starting to see as well is quicker dwell time solutions that turn people in and out. So it gives them still a lounge experience, but it's done so in a more efficient, smaller footprint type environment, where people can come in, quickly and efficiently grab what they need, and then, head off to their flight. So I think it's looking at, not just the traditional lounge experience, but how can maybe smaller footprints that were maybe used for something different previously be converted into a lounge to give them a lounge-like experience. So lots can be done.
What I found interesting in the report as well is this concept of the temporary lounge and pop-up retail in an airport. Can you kind of explain what these concepts look like in the airport setting, and really what kind of operational advantages these models have for space-constrained airports?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think the point there, Joe, is people are looking for points of engagement, right? And something different and something new and something exciting, so that when they go into their airport, they may be seeing something that they haven't seen before, or maybe they get an opportunity to, engage with brands or concepts that they're interested in, but haven't necessarily explored previously. But hey, I'm in an airport now, and I've got a little bit of, time on my hands, and yeah, I'd love to go and explore something. So, I mean, just to give an example of a concept, I mean, wouldn't it be great if, a whiskey brand could, come and set up a little pop-up where people get in and come in, and they have the opportunity to, sample some whiskey. There's some engaging, sort of entertainment or something that's happening in that space. So it's to draw to people, and they get to sample things and maybe purchase things that they haven't done, previously before. 3 months later, that same space can turn into something, different. Maybe it's a different brand that comes in, and maybe it's a travel affiliated brand, or it's more of a luxury brand, but, different brands that can come in and showcase what they're doing, and provide that, as I say, really that point of engagement and interest. So.
Now, one of the things on the report too is just talking about digital enablement for the traveler, and how that's become such a crucial aspect of just how we move as a country, and just through our airports, through our airlines, everything like that. And 56% of travelers want a unified app. That's something that isn't necessarily there today. But how can airports speed up their digital transformation to offer a more seamless experience for travelers?
Yeah, we think this, Joe, I mean, we think this is a huge, opportunity, both in terms of it checks all the boxes. It helps with passenger experience, it helps with revenue driving, and it can also help, as I was saying earlier, about driving people to different places in the airport to kind of help with that crowding and that space congestion. So, I think, one of the challenges and obstacles that we're seeing is maybe airports not quite having the right resource and infrastructure to be able to really take advantage of this opportunity, and having maybe that sort of CIO combined with commercial partnership that says, hey, look, a key strategic pillar of our airport environment experience is having the right digital solution and putting these experiences together. And I think it's really, having that enablement and that structure in place, and making it a priority on the roadmap. And because there are solutions out there. I mean, we know we have solutions ourselves that we can bring to airports to help that. But I think as I say, one of the obstacles we've seen is airports aren't necessarily, resourced, to be able to do it. But we think it's huge, and the opportunity to take advantage of, digital revenue and digital services is it's a massive opportunity.
And that being said, 83% of travelers said better pricing would drive more digital engagement from them. So how could airports manage this while protecting concessionaire margins?
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, there is a perception, and that was one of the things, Joe, that came up in the research around, the affordability, and prices in, an airport world. And I actually think that's one of the great things of a digital tool is you can create a perception that, you know, you, pricing and discounts and targeted offers that you can give to consumers to try and break that perception that actually the airport is an affordable place to shop. And you can do targeted offers, as I was saying, that really thought through and strategic, that try and drag people to places that maybe underutilized, or buy products that maybe have been sat on the shelves that you want to push through your inventory. And just creating an awareness as well that, of things that exist in the airport. I mean, that's sometimes part of the problem, is that people don't necessarily know that, hey, if I turn left here and I walk 3 gates down, then I've got the opportunity to, see a great clothing store that maybe I really like. I just didn't know it was there. And so, pushing that visibility and awareness out there, can really help solve, a lot of those things.
Now, one of the things I really found interesting with the revolution we've seen in just the concessions programs, and again, the last 10 to 15 years in airports, is that only 59% of travelers are satisfied with the retail and dining value for the money they get. That being said, so what kind of changes could airports make to shift this perception without just racing to the bottom on price to give the travelers what they're looking for?
Yeah, no, it's as I say, right. I mean, that it's about perception, isn't it? And breaking perception that, airports can do. And so, that's where I think, with targeted discounts and targeted offers that, lure people in and attract people in. I mean, you may not have your entire menu that is offering that discount, but you maybe say, hey, we're running a special and a promotional on, a, burger, fries and drink combo today. It's, 20% off, right? That's drawing people in and say, all right, this is really good value. And maybe they take advantage of it, or maybe they buy something that's full priced on the menu. But, I think by doing that says, you're really taking into consideration that perception on price. Whereas if you don't have that type of solution in place, then it's just a flat fixed menu. I mean, that can be like, oh, wow, everything's expensive here. Whereas you can be a bit more strategic and targeted with, how you play with price. And it gives you the opportunity for dynamic pricing too. I mean, maybe certain times of the day, right, where, you're quieter and you have capacity, you can push out more things. Whereas in peak periods when it's busier, when you want to maximize, you don't have the capacity and you don't, the demand is there, then, you can charge that full price. So, it provides all those different types of opportunities to solve that problem.
Now, one of the things we've also seen in recent years has been the emergence of the airport-run loyalty programs, and they continue to gain ground as some of the airline ones have become a little more unattainable for the average traveler. What would a successful airport-specific loyalty strategy look like for some of these airports looking to try and bring that into their facilities?
Yeah, no, great question. And again, we agree. We think there's a big opportunity for, airports to own that customer. I think one of the challenges we often hear, and the narrative is, well, who owns the customer? Surely it's the airline owning the customer, right? And it's really the airline driving the loyalty program. And I mean, and that is true to an extent, but we're also like, when the passenger is in your airport, they're your customer, right? And you've got a whole range of services and things in your airport that you can offer to them. So they're your customer while they're in the airport. So why can't you both, have a loyalty program, right? A restaurant is next to a hotel. A hotel has a loyalty program, and the restaurant also has a loyalty program. And the consumer wins because they get rewarded, when they use that hotel and when they use that restaurant, but they're, connected to each other. And we think it's the same thing in an airport environment. And encouraging spend and then giving people, points for that they can subsequently reward and earn tiers and earn loyalty as in a traditional loyalty program. I mean, why can't that exist in an airport? And if that's done well, then, and you're thinking about that through, then of course it should create value for, concessionaires and not erode it, because the intent is you're driving incremental, volume, right? And you're encouraging and incentivizing people to spend. So as all loyalties programs do, they when done well, they drive value and they drive loyalty. So we think it can work very well in an airport environment.
Now, one of the things noted is that satisfaction for the traveler, it varies extremely widely wherever market we're looking at across the globe. With places like Singapore and the UAE have absolutely through the roof satisfaction for their travelers versus some other markets. That being said, what can North American airports learn from those regions that have seen success that they could be bringing into their facilities to try and get that same level of success that we're seeing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think to be fair, a lot of those, airports in the regions you mentioned, like the Changi's who, top the market, every year, and some of the, the airports in the Middle East and Asia, let's acknowledge they have benefited a lot from, newer infrastructure, newer airports, newer investment, bigger size, bigger spaces. So I think it's always going to be difficult to match that, except, when you're building a brand new infrastructure project. But I mean, if you take in some of the cues and the things that we've been doing, I mean, one of the key things that we see is how are they creating environments that are really welcoming and calming and relaxing, right? So there's things like introducing like lots of greenery and plants and biophilia that kind of create a much calmer, relaxed atmosphere. Maybe not having announcements, maybe incorporating some water features that just give the passenger a much more relaxed and calmer experience when they walk in. I mean, maybe that's something that can be done with, limited investment, to try and, elevate that atmosphere and environment. I mean, that's just one thing in terms of, the overall atmosphere. But they do that very, very well. And they always say, calmer passengers, just feel happier, and they spend more. So that's really a focus that they've had.
And one of the things is that the youth movement, if you will, in travel is here that we've been anticipating for years. Millennials and Gen Zs are now dominating the leisure and even the business leisure travel. That being said, what kind of emerging behaviors from these groups should airport planners be anticipating now looking forward?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, Joe, look, a lot of what we've talked about already is very much what that segment and that younger traveler is wanting. And I think we have to your point, I mean, we have to acknowledge that, the millennial now is the largest, demographic traveling through, the airport. And that's obviously going to be, replaced by Gen Z in the coming years. And, newer generations have different, needs and wants than, some of the older generations. And so, as you're thinking about, your airport, strategy and, improvement, we know how long it takes to turn things around and do infrastructure projects. So you've really got to be looking at what that newer generation wants, because they're going to continue to be, the vast majority of passengers coming through. And our experience very much says that this traveler is more of an experience seeker, right? They want things like lounges, they want things like entertainment options, they want to be entertained, they want to have premium dining options, and they want to have digital access as well. And a lot of what we talked about already, the loyalty programs, the ability to be able to, pre-book or pre-order, use a fast track. They want a seamless, you know, lack of a frictionless, experience when they come through the airport, because that's what they get when they, use so many other non-airport experiences. So they want that in their airport experience too. So it's a lot of what we talked about, very, very relevant for that audience.
And that audience as well is mentioning the flexible retail and the locally branded food and beverages that a lot of these younger travelers are looking for. How can airports reduce lead time and risk for concessions to meet this demand versus maybe traditional avenues they've taken in the past?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I think that localization, that sense of place, giving me the experience that I am where I am, right? Is huge. And so we've seen and we continue to see, and we believe that building, spaces that provide flexibility for things to be changed out, is something that is going to be, give that flexibility to be able to make, changes. If something doesn't work, then, try something different. Combining that, traditionally food and beverage and retail were separated, right? And had, walls built between them. So breaking down those walls and combining those where, it's more of a marketplace type approach, where you've got access to F&B, you've also got retail, and people can kind of like seamlessly blend between the two, and things are more visible. We think that's, a much smarter and more efficient, use of space as well. And we've seen some airports do that, quite well. And, from the retail perspective, as you mentioned, like really bringing in things that are, unique about that area, providing options that you couldn't necessarily get in, big box stores that they can get wherever they travel, right? Providing things that are really unique to that place, that can be that little gift that they purchase to take home, or like that memento of the trip that they've had. We think will continue to help drive spend in the retail area.
Now, one of the things also noted in the report that was interesting, in a way not surprising, is the gap between digital service awareness and actual usage with the travelers. What kind of communication strategies are working to close that gap that we could be using in other markets where they might see a bigger challenge?
Yeah, no, really, really good point. I mean, I think you touched earlier, Joe, about an app, and is it an app? Well, it might not be. It could just be a scan a QR code, right? That takes you instantly, to that platform where you don't necessarily, if you don't want to download an app and go through that process, then you can still get access to everything through a QR code. And so having things placed, whether that be physically, digitally on screens in high traffic locations that really give visibility to, hey, if you want to learn about this airport and all the experiences, scan this QR code. Doing that at the security where people, are just, waiting and can sort of see, as soon as they get through security and they're figuring out, do I turn left? Do I turn right? Giving them that opportunity to access, the services, even if they book their parking, like, making it aware there. So there's lots of different touch points on the journey that you can create an opportunity to engage with the passengers and say, hey, click on this, or click on this link, or scan this QR code, or download this app, and you'll get, access to everything that, is within this airport, and join and sign up for our rewards. We think there's many places to try and acquire customers onto those platforms.
And my last question for you today, we've discussed a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges that airports are facing. And as we mentioned at the beginning, global air travel is predicted to double over the next 20 years. With that being said, what piece of advice would you give to airports executives today for how they prepare for this future?
I mean, it's a great question. I think there's two things, right? There's, if I may, I know you asked for one, but I do think that there's two that have to be, considered, well. One is the physical, space and footprint, and really thinking about how do you optimize spaces and the space that you have to be as efficient and provide the services that the future customer wants, a lot of which we've talked about today. Secondly, if you haven't got a digital roadmap in place that is going to give the passengers those services that they really need and provide access, digitally, start to really plan a digital roadmap, and put those things in place, because you need both of those elements combined, to be, successful, and making sure you're really planning to cope as best you can with what's coming at us in the future. It's a good problem to have, right? But demand and crowding is a good problem, but a problem nonetheless. So those are the two things.
Wonderful. Chris, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Very fascinating report, and I can't wait to see how we're going to continue to see everything evolve for that airport experience going forward into the future.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Aviation Pros Podcast. Stay ahead in airport operations and leadership by subscribing to our Airport Business Daily Newsletter, your go-to source for the latest industry insights. And don't forget to explore even more at AviationPros.com, the home of exclusive content for aviation professionals like you. I'm Joe Petrie. We'll catch you next time.